Good evening. My name is Madeline Turner Dickerson, and I am the historian for this section of the National Council of Negro Women and your host for this evening. The National Council of Negro Women, Rankin, Mon Valley, Pittsburgh section welcomes you on National Voter Registration Day as well as during Constitution Week. Before we begin, I would like to share with you the faces of some people who made the supreme sacrifice, their life, to either vote or help others to vote. Osino, Florida, Election Day Massacre. Julius Perry was lynched from a lamppost for voting, and his town was destroyed. There is not an accurate count of how many people were murdered, but the Black residents fled the town and their property was sold to the white residents. This occurred in 1920. It was decades before any Black people would return to the town, not until 1980, which was 60 years later. It was a white town for 60 years. Officials finally agreed to include the massacre in Florida history books because it was something that the residents really didn't talk about. In early 2020, they approved reparations for property, but and that was done by the Florida Senate, but it was defeated in the Florida House of Representatives in March 2020. Maceo Snipes was a World War II veteran, shot to death in the back in Taylor County, Georgia in 1946. Reverend George Lee, shot to death while driving in Belzoni, Mississippi in 1955. Lamar Smith, shot to death in Brookhaven, Mississippi in 1955. Dr. Thomas H. Brewer, physician, shot to death by a politician in Columbus, Georgia in 1956. James Earl Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Henry Schweiner, shot to death with one shot to the heart for the two white freedom riders. And Chaney was severely beaten first and then shot 3 times. This occurred in Philadelphia, Mississippi in 1964. This is a picture of how the FBI and the other officials who were looking for their bodies, this is how they found them. Vernon Ferdinand Delmer house was firebombed and he died from burns in Hattiesville, Mississippi in 1966. However, it's helpful to remember something that he often said to others as he encouraged them to vote. He would tell them, if you don't vote, you don't count. Our topic this evening is mobilizing the local Black vote. Panel participants are Reverend Maureen Cross Bolden, Miss Alana Carter, Miss Alice Taylor Dias, Miss Betty Pickett, and Reverend Denise Welch. We will start with Miss Alana Carter, who is the historian for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH.
So thank you so much, Ms. Dickerson, for that introduction, as well as reminding us why it's so very important that we remember how hard people fought and died for us to have this precious right to vote. I am the historian for the Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH here in Pittsburgh. Our branch was founded in 2012, and it was named in honor of Dr. Edna B. McKenzie, who was a renowned journalist for the Pittsburgh Courier, and she was an African American history scholar. So our branch is part of a larger branch, which is our national branch. And if you're not familiar with what ASALH is, it stands for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And it was founded in 1915 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is well known as the founder of Black History Month. So this year for our national conference, we have a theme of African Americans and the vote. And of course, you know, this is a very pivotal year for this theme, for us to focus on this theme, mostly because one, it is a historic election year, and two, it is the 150th anniversary of African American men gaining the right to vote. They gained the right to vote in 1870 with the passage of the 15th Amendment. It is also the 100th anniversary of the passage of women's right to vote, which was granted in 1920. So as we embark upon, you know, this new election season, we need to keep that in mind that, you know, these amendments, though it may seem, you know, like it was a long time that we've had them, we actually haven't. It's only been 150 years for African American men, and it's been 100 years for women. So our conference, of course, like as I said, focuses on African Americans and the vote. And a lot of the sessions and plenaries that were done were focused around this, and also, again, mobilizing and looking at strategic ways to get more African Americans involved and registered to vote. So one of the plenary sessions that I was able to attend that I found very useful was Dr. William Barber's plenary on repairs of the breach in the Poor People's Campaign. So what I would say is if you're looking for more information to learn a little bit more history about the long journey to getting voting rights, I would definitely say, you know, you should go to asalh.org and sign up for our conference, which runs until September 30th. So again, in looking at, you know, the history of getting the right to vote, on the contrary, a lot of people think that African Americans did not have the right to vote until the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870. While, you know, as an entirety, the country, most of the country did not allow this, or the colonies at that time. The state of Pennsylvania and some other northern states actually did allow free African Americans to vote. That right was given to us in 1790 here in Pennsylvania, but it wasn't, it didn't last long. It was challenged for the first time in Pennsylvania in a historic case called Hobbs versus Fogg, and this took place in Luzerne County, where William Fogg, who is a free person of color, was prevented from voting by an inspector of elections by the name of Hiram Hobbs. Unfortunately, Mr. Hobbs lost this case. I'm sorry, Mr. Fogg lost this case. And what resulted afterwards was the mass disenfranchisement of eligible Black voters. In 1838, the Pennsylvania Constitution was updated to say now that only free white men could vote as opposed to just saying that free men, without any reference to color, could vote. However, the citizens of Pennsylvania, and especially here in Pittsburgh, actually did not take that line down. They wrote a document called the Pittsburgh Memorial, and it was prominent citizens from the city of Pittsburgh, prominent African American citizens such as John B. Vashon and the Woodson family, who wrote this document as a declaration to say, hey, look, we pay our taxes, we're upstanding citizens, we contribute to society, we should have this right. They wrote this, this went as far as the Pennsylvania legislature, but the right was still not given back to the African Americans here. And we did not gain that right again until the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870, which again allowed African American men the right to vote. It would be almost 90 years later before that full right was realized with the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As Ms. Dickerson mentioned, there were a lot of people prior to this who were fighting for our right, and they really laid their lives on the line. Why? Because it wasn't as if when the passage of the 15th Amendment happened that it was automatically African Americans had the right to vote. They were met with so much opposition at the polls. Things such as literacy tests were imposed upon them. It could be something as daunting as quoting the Constitution for them to be able to cast their ballot. You also had tactics such as taxes that were levied against them for trying to vote. And of course, this was very hard, given that these were people who had just recently mostly become free from the bondage of slavery, in which they were not being paid wages. So how could most of them even afford to pay a poll tax? Also denied to them mostly was the right to read and write. So how could they possibly have read the Constitution in a lot of cases? And so while there were some people who actually were able to pay these astronomical fees for poll taxes and they were able to pass the literacy tests, there were also crazy things such as guess how many gumballs were in a jar that they were made to pass, made to pass in order to be able to be eligible to vote. And even if on a fluke they were able to do that, they were still met with opposition. And in some cases, they were met with terrorism, such as being whipped or flogged and driven away from the polling place or even killed. So in 1965, with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, we were able to finally see the realization of our right to vote. I would like to say that it was wholly realized, but it wasn't. Because discrimination in many forms continued. And it still continues today, even though we are much more mobilized than we have been in the past. It continues in the forms of misinformation about politics, changing of polling places without notice, even updated ID requirements, which sometimes disenfranchises elderly people and people with disabilities. So we must remember that this journey is, it's far from over, and we must do everything we can to stay educated about our rights as voters. Remember the history and remember those that came before us that made this happen for us, and we must register to vote. And with that, I just want to say, get out and vote.
Next, we will have Miss Alice Taylor Dias, member of the Political Committee for the National Council of Negro Women, the Rankin-Mon Valley, Pittsburgh section, and also involved with PA Votes.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. As she stated, that I am part of the political committee for the National Council of Negro Women, and we've been working very hard for the last couple of months getting as many people registered to vote as possible. Um, I have focused on the young people, and they did not realize that they were old enough to vote. But we have been getting them registered and getting the registrations in. We have visited food banks. We visited the basketball courts, barbershops, beauty salons, and we're working very hard trying to get as many people as possible registered. And now we have to encourage them, now that they're registered, to please go out and vote. Um, they did shut down some of the polling places during the primary election, which limited and prevented a lot of people from not voting. But this year, the polling places will be reopened. We're going to try to have cars available to transport the seniors back and forth to the polling places. We did that at the primaries, last primaries, and that worked out very well. So we've been working really hard, and I'm encouraging people, particularly the graduates, enclose a registration form in a gift when the kids who graduated, because if they turn 18 by November the 5th, they can vote. I registered probably about at least three high school graduates who were 17 and would be turning 18 in October. And they didn't realize that they could register and be eligible to vote in November, but they can. So we've been working with PA Vote to get the vote out, get people registered and get the vote out. And we've had a lot of success. We've registered quite a few people. And I just hope they follow through and come out and vote election day.
Okay, next we're going to hear from Miss Betty Pickett. She is a member of Alpha Alpha Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she is a member of the Connection Committee, which is basically a political committee of the chapter.
Thank you so much, Laura Madeline. First of all, I want to make sure that everybody understands that as a sorority, we are a 501c3. Therefore, we do not support a particular candidate. What we do is support everybody to get out and vote. And one of the things that I want to say is that a lot of people think the civil rights movement was happening in the early 60s. What we don't realize is that the civil rights movement started day one when the first African put their foot on this soil. We've been fighting for our rights ever since. And when it comes to the vote, we have to remember that after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, Black men actually held office. And I think folks got really concerned about the power that was being exercised by Black men. And so that's when they began to move back, take some of that voting power away. And then, of course, during the kind of memes that were going on, which is a new word, during that time, they didn't allow women a voice to do much of anything. In fact, during that period, women were at the mercy of just about everybody, white men, white women, Black men, and of course the Black church. Black women at that point were not supposed to be able to think on their own. And so they were being told what to do. And so you had people like Sojourner Truth and Ida B. Wells and Nilly Quander and other people who fought to make sure that women had the right to vote. They joined the National Association of Women's Groups so they could expand their area of influence. And so that's what they did. And so now we come up to today where unfortunately, we're still fighting some of those battles with voter suppression. And I'm glad Alana brought that up, because this is the kind of thing that really makes voting very difficult. It disenfranchises everyone. And I heard someone say that the most important public office in this country is the citizen. And so we have to exercise our constitutional right to be about the business of determining what future we're going to have. And I know with the sorority, we have implemented several things. And one of the things that we talk about is uh, gearing up or energizing or activating your superpower. If your superpower is talking on the telephone, get out your contact list and start calling folks. If your superpower is texting, then get out your contact list and start texting. If your superpower is writing emails, then get out your contact list and start writing emails. And of course, if you're on social media, just constantly remind people to vote. And the one thing that we want to talk about is that when you are voting, you're not just voting for a person. There are several people on the ballot. And so you have to take a look at everyone who is running and make a decision about who's going to best represent you and the needs that you have. So we want to make sure that you are a well-informed person in when you go to vote. We also want to make sure that people understand how to vote. You can do it in person, or you can do it through absentee ballot, which requires a little more effort, or through the mail-in ballot, which, as far as I know, every registered voter, eligible voter, should have received their mail-in ballot sometime this week. If you did not get your ballot, then you need to make sure, you need to go on one of the websites, votespa.com, and just check and see and make sure that your registration is still valid. People don't realize that if they haven't voted since, let's say, Obama, there's a good chance that are no longer on the voting rolls. You don't want to find that out come election day. You want to make sure you know well in advance, because the last day, I wanted to make sure I had all of this right. The last day to register is October 19th. So we're coming down to the wire on this. So also what we're doing, the sorority is doing, is that we're looking at members who live in certain zip codes. We want to take a look at senior high rises to see if there's anyone there who needs help in getting their mail-in ballot completed. And when they get their ballot itself, do they need help and assistance in filling that out? We also want to make sure that there are signs in businesses in these areas reminding people to vote and how to get information if they're not sure. We just want to make sure that everybody knows that there are going to be several places where people will be able to drop their ballot off. And I'm just going to read them very quickly. I'm sure they will come out in the newspaper or online or somewhere, but just to let you know that there will be 5 of the 9 locations will be open 3 weekends in October. October 10th and 11th, 17 and 18, and October 24 and 25. Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sundays 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the sites will be the county office building downtown, where at Forbes and Ross Street, the office county building at the North Park Ice Rink, South Park Ice Rink, Boyce Park Ski Lodge, DPW Garage number 2 in Carnegie, CCAC Allegheny, ECCAC on North Homewood, and CCAC South, and the Shop and Save parking lot in the Hill District. These are all places that you can drop your mail-in ballot once you receive it. They should be coming out sometime, if not this week, early next week, because it seems like all the court cases in Pennsylvania have been satisfied. Josh Shapiro was talking this morning. There's only one left that has to come to a conclusion. And once that happens, they'll be able to start sending out the ballots. So I'm just hoping, I want to just say, exercise your right to vote, because if you don't vote, then you lose the right to complain. If you vote, then you can complain as long as the day is long. We don't want to miss an opportunity for you to take charge of what is important in your life to make your life better. And with that, I will say thank you, and be sure and activate all your superpowers, whatever that might be. Take care, be safe, and stay healthy.
Next, we will hear from Reverend Dr. Denise Welch, Senior Pastor of Bidwell Presbyterian Church and Chaplain for UPMC Western Psychiatric Hospital, plus past political candidate.
Thank you, Dr. Dickerson. My comments are scripted because I want to make sure that those who are watching are hearing me very, very clearly. We are living in the bonds of extreme tension. We are between the tension of risking our individual health from an advancing virus and the seeking of national justice. We are between the tension of not being in our sanctuaries and yet called to be in the streets for the sake of righteousness. We are between the tension of anger tinged with rage and yet the determination to be peace-filled, making sure all voices are heard. We are living in the tension of an outrageous, inhumane, and continuous murders of our African American men, women, and children, and yet we have a divine call to be as humane and as loving as we possibly can be. We are in the complete and utter tension of not hating those sworn to protect and serve our society, yet knowing that we as African Americans are considered the ones who represent the menace to society. We are living in the tension between the history of a George Wallace, Jim Crow-laced, public lynching type of unfettered racism and the current standing alongside sympathetic partners, color blindness, and color obsession. The obsession that comes particularly when an orange man in a White House sends smoke signals to rednecks to violate Black people, separate brown people, telling us to go green while ignoring red blood flowing on Black streets with white lines. Dr. King told us to take this tension through the discipline of nonviolent protest and create a pressure that alerts our elected officials that we will not stand for a no or a wait or an in due time, and alert those who would delay or deny justice that you can no longer turn a blind eye, a deaf ear, or offer limp rhetoric. So we take our tension right now, and we place it in the transforming crucible of our faith, the transformational command of the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, and we turn this tension into our intention. We will make sure the tension placed on George Floyd's neck to be our intention to make sure it never happens again. We will take the holy wind, the air given to us in the garden, and the spirit of a holy God, and breathe for George Floyd, and breathe for every other Black man, woman, and child, defying the wicked and reclaiming what they had no right to take, since they did not give that divine air breathed into our nostrils at creation. We will turn our attention and make it our intention to see that equal justice under the law is not a hope, but an actuality. Though we live in tension, we will cast an intentional vote for those who have the courage of their convictions, and for those who believe, like Angela Davis, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. Yes, we live in tension, but we are here to change our tension into the intention to stop accepting racist attitudes, racial passivity, and even Black complicity. It is time, past time, to cast our vote, to cast an intelligent vote, to either do it by mail, to show up in groups at the election office and turn our votes in person, to go to those boxes that are set up to make it convenient for us, or to simply show up at the polling places on election day. You may have to wait there a while, so take something to entertain yourself. Take a book, take your favorite music, turn it into a party, but you stand there until it's your turn to cast your vote. It's time for us to act, not be passive. And I'm encouraging my pastoral colleagues all over this county, press your members to register, check their registration, vote by mail or vote in person, and be as intentional about that press as we are about asking for the offering. Our very lives are at stake. And so now it's time for us to put our faith into action and vote. Thank you for this time.
Reverend Welch, you are a past candidate for office, and so is your husband. Could you maybe share with us what African Americans need to do in order to get African American people elected when they run for office? Because we have not been successful. And as Ms. Carter mentioned, the history of Pennsylvania, we really need to be concerned about Black people getting other Black people in office.
Mm-hmm. Our experiences were painful and educational at the same time. What we both learned, if I may speak for my husband, we learned that even the office that you seek is not your primary concern. You have to be concerned all the way up and down the ladder, the chain of command, the party line. Our committee people are as important as the offices that we seek. We cannot allow folks to be co-opted or coerced or to just vote straight tickets anymore. we have to be concerned. We have to get committee people in line who are willing to stand up to the good old boy network. And that even includes our Democratic and our Republican parties.
Mhm.
I would also say that training is necessary. You have to have more than just a good reputation, a good heart, and believe that this is what you are supposed to do. You need the training to do it. And so you need to get connected with organizations that train us and that particularly focus on African Americans and how to galvanize our communities. I tell this story on behalf of my husband, but it still breaks my heart when I think about it because I faced the same thing as I ran. There was a particular Black business. We were trying to get our business people on board as well. And the business person would not endorse my husband because he had gotten an order to fulfill a particular food item from the competitor, and that $800 thing bought his vote for the next 4 years. And it didn't matter that the candidate did nothing for the community, continued to do nothing for the community, only showed up in the community during voting time and put in that order, and that was enough to keep him from voting his conscience and his values, but for that $800. It pains me because sometimes our votes come cheap. And I do think that you have to be savvy enough to be able to do that. And I'm not sure that as African American candidates that we have the training, the longevity. If you want to run for office, you can't decide 2 or 3 months out. You got to decide 2 or 3 years out.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be savvy in fundraising. You've got to make connections that you don't think will benefit you right now, but they will down the line. And then if I say one more thing else, it is just this very quickly. We also need the training to learn how to clear the field. Sometimes there are too many candidates in the field, and we have to learn how to be savvy enough to clear the field so that we can make our candidacy successful.
Well, how would you recommend clearing the field? I know that you encountered that when you ran for city council for District 9.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't have an answer because I didn't have the training. And since running in that election, I've learned that that is something that you need to do. I've not had that training yet, so I don't quite know what the answer is. But I do know that people kept telling me that there are too many candidates, that the vote is going to get split 3 ways. And sure enough, it did. And so, but I think that's something to be aware of, that just because you have the desire and the will and the support, until you do something that fundamental, you're probably not going to win, particularly when you're running against an incumbent.
Okay, well, thank you, because it is really important. People are really focused on the presidential election, but we need to realize that we need to be as supportive, or maybe even more supportive, of the other elections. Mm-hmm. It can't just be about the president. It needs to be about the mayor. It needs to be about state representatives and all the different offices. And we really need to support our African American candidates. So thank you for giving us some insight so that we are prepared not only for this election, but future elections too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Ms. Pickett, you mentioned where there were going to be drop boxes for people to leave their ballots. Now, the National Council of Negro Women, we also are very involved in the Mon Valley area. Will there be drop boxes, for example, in Duquesne, McKeesport, and these other municipalities?
As of this moment, I cannot say yes or no. I just don't know. Right now, they're just in the city of Pittsburgh. And well, not quite, but still, I don't know of how far out into the county they're going. I know there has been requests made. Uh, when they talked about it, I participated in the meeting that the Board of Election had, I believe it was last week. And they did not mention anything further out into the county. So I don't know. I'm sorry to say, I just don't know.
Well, if there are people listening from, Duquesne and the Keysport and this other municipalities, how would they find out?
I would say start calling the Board of Elections right now, 350-412-350-4500. And just call and ask. And if you're not getting answers, keep calling until you do.
And one of the things that we did in Homestead last year for the senior citizens, we collected the ballots and carried them down to the elections office.
You can't do that this year. They'll be thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and that's why they're doing the drop boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can transport the senior citizen to a drop box, but that senior citizen has to put the ballot in, him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
Even though
they're just waiting for something like that to happen so they can throw these ballots out.
Even though you had to, because I had the forms that the seniors signed giving me permission to take their ballots downtown.
I think it's over an abundance of caution this year, since there's such an effort to, shall I use the R word?
Yes.
Rig the election, that people are just saying, we're not taking any chances.
Okay.
We don't want to give anybody any reason to question what we've done, particularly in the Black community, since we are being targeted for voter suppression, not just here in the city of Pittsburgh, but in the county, Philadelphia, and all the surrounding counties. They're not worried so much about the middle part of the state because they figured they've got that vote. But where you've got a concentration of Black folk, they know we can be the deciding factor in the state of Pennsylvania, because we're on that tipping point right here. Mm-hmm. I think the percentages are even 48% for both candidates. Mm-hmm. So Black folks will be the ones who tip it one way or the other. And so that's why we've got to come out.
And Betty, could you address a little bit, because there are several people who've been incarcerated that they've been told that they can't vote?
If they have served their sentence, they can vote. They can vote. That is not something. And even if those who are in jail, if they have not been brought up on charges yet, and they're there because they can't afford bail, then they too can vote.
Okay.
Now, the other rumor that's going around is that folks are being told that if they vote by mail, that means if they have any outstanding warrants, the police are coming after them. No, that's a lie. If the credit card companies are coming after you, if you have overdue bills, no, that's a lie. Nobody is getting your information. Everything is barcoded. So they don't know who belongs to that barcode. So don't fall for all of those telephone scams. And I mean, I have it on my phone and I keep it so, because people don't believe what I'm saying. I said, well, here it is. And what I find more disturbing is that the FBI knows who's doing it and they can't do anything about it for whatever reason. So I'm that's why we have to be overwhelmingly at the polls, overwhelmingly mail-in ballots overwhelmingly. So there is absolutely no question about who won,
Mhm. Mhm.
because the game plan is to get the Electoral College to make the decision for us.
Right.
Oh my God.
So we've got to make sure that does not happen.
So, Ms. Pickett, may I ask a question too? This is another rumor that I've heard, that when you get your mail-in ballot, that you have to put 2 stamps on the envelope or it won't be delivered. Is that true?
Your mail-in ballot has the necessary postage already on the envelope.
Yes. Okay.
That's
Thank you.
just another way. Because how many people have stamps at home? Not very many. And so they say, okay, well, I guess I just won't vote. No. Put it in the little envelope and then seal it. Put it in the big envelope, then seal it. You're good to go. You are good to go.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and
That's
I just be sure, if you're not clear on something, ask a question. 412-350-4500. I will say that until I'm blue in the face, because ask questions. You don't even have to take my word for it. Call that number and ask your question. We've got too much at stake here. I don't think people realize that Social Security is on the line. Medicare is on the line.
Everything.
Your health care is on the line.
right.
I mean, your voting rights are on the line.
Right.
Women's rights are on the line. So, folks, if you don't want to go back to living in the 50s, and I don't think I want to go back there, you need to get out and vote, because our very existence is on the line. Because if we don't take charge now, we can have the kind of situation where we won't have control over anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think police are bad now, we haven't seen anything yet. They've already been given the go-ahead. Now, I know in Pittsburgh, they're trying very hard to change that. But you can't change a heart that doesn't want to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, I found when I was going door to door and approaching the young people, some of the responses that I got from them when I would ask them, are you registered to vote, and why aren't you registered? And the answer was, well, nobody ever asked me to vote.
Well, don't wait.
So we have to approach those young people, because they will vote if you talk to them and get them registered. I think they will turn out and vote. But their response is, well, nobody ever asked them. Nobody ever asked me to register. Nobody ever asked me to vote.
Well, there's a concentrated effort to get on the college campuses to try to get young people to vote, and that always comes into a lot of confusion, because it's, should I vote here in Pennsylvania, or should I vote where I live?
Right.
And it's just, the bottom line is you can't vote in both places.
Right.
You have to pick a place.
Right.
And you have to register in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So Ms. Pickett, what would you recommend that a college student do?
Well, it's their level of comfortability. If they have been living in the city, the state of Pennsylvania, they have the right to register here. And so they can register and vote here in Pennsylvania, but they cannot apply for an absentee ballot in another state. That is illegal. So if they want to vote in their state because there may be other people on the ballot that they want to vote for, then they have to get an a mail-in ballot for that state. And then they cannot vote in Pennsylvania, which brings me to something else. You know, folks don't realize that all politics is local. The reason we have so many problems in Pennsylvania is that we're not holding elected officials accountable. They tell us everything they want us to hear, or they want us to hear, while they're trying to get elected. But then once they get elected, they go along with the program. And the program is not necessarily in our best interest. Now, I have to say, part of that is our problem, that we did not hold them accountable, nor did we give them the support that they felt comfortable putting forth whatever it is that we want. Because I don't think anybody wants to commit political suicide by going out there and saying and doing something, and then you look behind you and there's nobody there. So we need to stand behind. Once we tell you this is what we want you to do for us, we have to be there in support of that individual.
We were supposed to have a representative from the
BPEP?
yeah, it's a black, I wanted to use her official name. The Black
Political Empowerment Project.
Right, right, BPEP. So I also want to mention that they are another organization that people can reach out to for information. And I believe that they are still giving people a ride to the poll.
As far as I know, they're trying to make that work in such a way, because of COVID, people have been a little bit leery about letting people in their cars, or it's just a little iffy right through here. I did see that during the primary, Port Authority was running buses around so people could get on buses and go vote. But now that all of the polling places have been returned to pre-primary places, we're not as handicapped as we were for the primary.
Mm.
So I can't speak to that. I don't know for sure.
So you're saying that where we normally would cast our ballot, that is available to us now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're going back to your original location, not
Yes.
this location. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Which
Well,
is going to make it a lot easier for a whole lot of folks.
It will,
Mhm.
particularly the seniors.
Excuse me?
Yeah, Mrs. Dickerson, I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject. It looks like we do have a caller on the line.
Yes, hello? Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Hi. On the air?
Yes, you are.
Hi. Great. Well, listen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, listen, I'll make it very, very brief. Listen, the conversation was lively. It's good information. I wanted to just to kind of dovetail off of something I think Betty's been pushing all throughout the show, and that was calling the Allegheny County Elections Department, because a lot of folks are still unaware, but there are quite a few vacancies still available for anyone interested in working on the polls. They will train you on how to run machines and how to operate the process during the election. You get paid for it, and it's a wonderful entry-level position for anyone interested in getting their feet warm in terms of getting involved with the electoral process. Secondly, I just want to give the council a compliment, and that is if everybody in the viewing audience would follow what you've been doing, we would not be, meaning the African American community, would not be in the rut that we're in. And what I mean by that is that I used to watch your show prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and you had your shows at the studio, information, power-packed, wonderful shows. Well, this pandemic hit, and your organization has been able to transition so quickly into this technology that we are now experiencing and you are still giving information out on an abbreviated form, and you've adjusted. And so if it's a lesson for everybody else to look, follow you, and to just apply it to our lives. You know, you get a bump in the road, you step over and keep moving. They give you lemons, you make lemonade. And so this is what I think is really wonderful about the show. But it is powerful. It is information backed. It is very timely. And you may also want to mention to a lot of folks, you may want to be very careful when they go to vote, because as you know, we still have the new voting machines. Everything is digital now, or computerized. And for a lot of seniors, that is intimidating in terms of technology. But by law, they cannot be forced, and no one can come in and tell them you got to hurry and get out of the way. They can take their time, make their selections, and then make sure that their votes count. Well, listen, thank you so much. I'm going to hang up and listen. And by the way, ladies, all of you look marvelous. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something else, Madeline. If folks are feeling a little insecure about voting and they've sent in their mail-in ballot, you can track that. If you go to Vote, VOTESPA, votespa.com, that site will give you everything you need to know. If you want to track your mail-in application, once it will tell you when it arrived, if it's been processed. That once you get your ballot and you submit your ballot, it will tell you when your ballot was received down at the Election Bureau, and it will also tell you when your ballot was counted. And so you can follow that process from beginning to end, so you will know that your vote was actually counted.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Pickett, for offering that information. Will soon be coming to a close, so I would like to share the following information. Our next scheduled broadcast on PCTV will be on Friday, October 2nd, from 6 until 7. While this evening we focused on the physical aspects of mobilizing the Black vote, on October 2nd, we will look at some of the legal issues that your vote may impact. We want you to vote, but we want you to be an informed voter. So I'm pleased to announce that Professor Jerry Dickinson, a constitutional law professor on the faculty of the University of Pittsburgh Law School, will be our guest. We are fortunate that it will be after the presidential debate, which is on Tuesday, September 29th. So join us on October 2nd and have your questions ready. So thank you for sharing this evening with us. And thank you, panel, for all the information that you were able to offer our audience.